friends. So I love teaching, and we all know that. And I just did recently a video on YouTube about some parasites, but as I was editing it and I was talking about a lot of stuff, I realized that there are a lot of visual learners out there, and parasites are very hard to explain. And honestly, parasites has kind of become one of my passionate topics to talk about. It's so relevant, it's so important, it's so heartbreaking, and I feel like the more knowledge we can get out there, the better. So I'm going to spread the knowledge that I know. I am not always 100% right. I did sit here as I did this research, and I was pulling it up on Google as well just to confirm. So if I'm wrong, it's not the end of the world, but I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the parasites we deal with in our area, in our herds, and kind of what are marketed as most common and what you should mostly be watching out for. Is it all of them? No, but these are the most common, what pretty much everybody will find and what everybody should kind of watch out for. So I made y'all a PowerPoint, and I'm going to sit here and explain it, and you're going to get a little bit of taste of Teacher Megan. And I hope you enjoy it, and I hope it helps everybody understand a little bit more, because I understand that when I just sit here and talk about this, it can be very confusing. If you're tired of hearing me talk about parasites, you don't have to watch. You don't have to. But I just feel like it's such an interesting topic, and as much as I hate the parasites, I love the science behind it. I love this kind of stuff. This kind of goes into biology, and I really like that kind of thing. So I'm going to explain it to you in the simplest terms that I can, and I hope you enjoy. So let's get to the PowerPoint. Okay, there is no easier way for me to do this than to just hold my little tripod right here on with my computer, and I don't have like a camera I can record myself, so I'm just going to talk behind here. This is how we do it. So, Explaining Parasites by Megan Morrow. I downloaded this cute little slide from SlidesGo. So, Barber Poleworms. This is the first worm we're starting with. This is the thing that I feel like we deal with the most. Now, do we deal with a lot of parasites? Yes, but this has been the resounding worm that we've dealt with the most, and it's the hardest worm to fight, in my opinion. So the first thing about it is they're highly host specific, which means they're just species specific. They say highly because there's always room for error, there's always room for adaptation, all of those kind of things, but these worms are typically only going to affect certain hosts, which means these are the typical hosts. So a barber pole worm will be specific to a goat. That means a goat barber pole worm cannot be ingested and infest a cow, but a cow barber pole worm can infest another cow. So goat will only get goat worm, barber pole worm specifically. Sheep will only get a sheep barber pole strain. That's the best way to put it, is it's the strain of worms. So there will be different strains of barber pole worms that are species specific. So your typical hosts are going to be small ruminants, meaning goats and sheep. Small ruminant just means a small animal that has 5 bellies. Ruminant just means 5 bellies. That's all it means. And a cow is also a ruminant, but they're not a small ruminant, they're a large ruminant, obviously. And camelids, which just means llamas and alpacas. Now, I'm not an expert by any means, especially when it comes to camelids, but we did have alpacas. They did get barber pole worms. That's what we lost Oki to, and they are just as susceptible to it as your goats and your sheep. Your sheep tend to have a little bit more immunity than your goats do, just because sheep are primarily grazers, where goats are foragers. So sheep are going to build up more of an immunity than goats will, but they still both get them. The worms will tear through them. It's all the same. Cows can also get them because they are a ruminant. Now, the thing with that is it's not rare for cows to get them. I wouldn't say it's common, but I don't have cows. What I was reading on the internet, because I heavily relied on the internet for the cow aspect of it, is that the cows can get it, but typically your adult cows are not going to get it. That doesn't mean they're not going to, but typically they're not going to. It's your young calves that are going to get it. So that's kind of the draw on it. But when it comes to the camelids and the small ruminants, I feel like everybody can get it. You know, you're gonna see it all over the place. So then that brings us to, what are they? They are a gastrointestinal parasite that causes life-threatening anemia. So anemia, if you don't know what that is, that's just like low blood cells. You are not producing enough blood. That is what actually kills the animal. The barber poleworm doesn't kill the animal, the anemia does. So I always word it as the barber poleworm is secondary to the anemia. So a lot of times you'll see that on a report that it's barber poleworms or anemia caused by barber poleworms is the cause of death. So I just want to make that important, to make that distinction, that it is them being anemic and the blood loss that kills them, because that is what we'll get there. We'll get there. That's what the gastrointestinal parasites, barber poleworms, eat, is the worms, or eats the worms. They eat the blood. They suck their blood. And so each female worm inside the body, this is important, inside the body, inside the rumen, it's inside one of their 5 bellies is where they are. Each female worm can lay 5,000 to 10,000 eggs per day. Now, these eggs do not hatch inside the tummy. You'll see in a minute where they do hatch, but think about that. One female worm, 5,000 to 10,000 a day. Do you see how this can become so deadly so quickly in one day? Each worm can consume 0.05 milliliters of blood a day. Now, does that seem like a lot? Maybe not, but I need you to think, what if you have thousands of worms? Do the math. That's a lot of blood loss, and if you don't catch that quickly, it's done. And then even when you do catch it, you're having to replenish the blood, fight the anemia. How do you do that? Well, there's tons of different measures. You can get blood transfusions, you can give red cell, you can give liquid chlorophyll, you can give iron injections. There's all kinds of things, but that's what you're fighting. You have to deworm them to kill the worms, and then you have to fight the anemia. So it's a dual purpose fight almost. And that's why it is so extremely difficult, because these parasites, barber pole specifically, suck the blood from the animal, which makes them lethargic and takes away their will to live, and they go down quick. And no wonder they go down quick if they're laying 5,000 to 10,000 eggs per day. Yeah, they're going down quick. So then that brings us to the life cycle. That's a picture of what a barber poleworm looks like. I know it's nasty. They are visible to the naked eye. I've never personally seen one. I've only seen tapeworms before, but you can see them on the blades of grass if they're old enough and big enough. So let's start here. Can you see me? Okay, here's my mouse. So the barber pole life cycle of a worm. This shows it in a goat. It is the same in all of the species that get it. For barber poleworms, this is exactly how they're passed. So let's start right here inside the goat. So the adult worms feed and reproduce in the abomasum, which is just one of the bellies, C3 and camelids. And so that just means the adult worms are here in their belly. They're feeding on the blood. They're also reproducing those 5,000 to 10,000 eggs a day. Then what happens is when the goat poops, the eggs are in their feces. Their feces go directly into the ground. So then the eggs hatch and the larvae develop into an effective 3rd stage larva inside the fecal pellets. So inside their little poopies are the eggs. The eggs then hatch inside the grass, and they're infective, meaning if they get them, they are alive and they are going in them and they will be able to do damage. Then the L3, which is just the 3rd stage larva, leave the fecal pellets and travel up the blades of grass in drops of water or dew. That is why it is perfect climate in Texas for these worms, because of our humidity. We always have some kind of dew in the air. And so they climb up the blades of grass, which is then how they're consumed. So how do you stop this? Well, one of the things that we do passively is drag the pasture to disturb this right here. If you keep moving the fecal around, they can't hatch. If you do pasture rotation over here, nothing can eat them and they will eventually die. Deworming, you kill the worms in here And then that's why when on the dewormers it says deworm and then 14 days later deworm again, because there will be eggs that are being hatched that you need to re-deworm to kill. So I hope that makes sense. It's a very simple cycle. Once you really get into the nitty-gritty of it, you really just want to disturb it in every way possible. And these worms can live up to a couple of months in the grass on their own. And I know a couple of months sounds like a long time, and it is, but when you think about it, when you think of pasture rotation, that's exactly why pasture rotation is done, so that those worms will die in the pasture without anything grazing on them, because grazing is exactly how they get them. And that's why people will dry lot, because if you dry lot, then yeah, you can have them poop, but they're not eating grass, because the grazers are not just going to eat the dirt. And if you're providing them hay off of the ground, then you eliminate this part of the cycle and we never get to this. And then if you deworm them, you no longer have the whole thing. So that's the benefit of dry lotting. But there are cons to that as well, and that's just depending on the kind of farm you have and if that's how you're gonna do it. Okay, here we go. The next worm that commonly we deal with is tapeworms. I'm sure you've heard of tapeworms. Lots of things can get tapeworms. You should just assume like pretty much everything can get tapeworms. Humans can get tapeworms. All livestock can pretty much get tapeworms. Birds, when I say birds, I mean like flying birds in the sky like hawks, but also poultry and emus and like all those kinds. I'm not 100% on emus, but I'm just saying birds and poultry in general, turkeys, that kind of thing. Cats and dogs, I'm sure you knew that. I even think fish can get tapeworms, but that's not, these are the ones that are kind of relevant to us. I was tending to put like the animals or people like in it being relevant to farm life, but lots of animals. I mean, there was a whole long list. I think I saw wolves on there. I thought I saw moose on there. Like all kinds of animals can get tapeworms, and humans can too. The good thing about that though is, again, these are host specific, mostly host specific. So for the purpose of this, if you're worried about getting tapeworms like a human getting tapeworms, I suggest you look into that on how you get it. You can deworm yourself. There's medication for it. It's really not the end of the world. It's not great, but it's not horrible. I've known people that have had tapeworms before, but it's okay. So this is specifically going to be about the animals regards to the tapeworms, but humans can get it as well, and it is mostly host specific. I say that because there is a marginal room for error. I'm not going to, even Google won't 100% say they're 100% host specific, because there are always weird outlier cases and adaptation for the future. So again, these are also gastrointestinal parasites that eat nutrients from the host. So not like barber pole that sucks blood. The tapeworms, they bury themselves into the stomach intestinal lining of the wall, and they suck the nutrients from the host. And that, oh, I thought I had another bubble for that one, but I guess not. So that's what a tapeworm looks like. For most animals, like livestock, the life cycle is the exact same as the barber poleworms, where they develop in their intestines, and then it hatches into the fecal, goes in the grass, and the animals absorb it just like that. But in cats and dogs, I'm sorry this image isn't clear. This was the best image I could find. But in cats and dogs, it's a little bit different. And so I think it's relevant to tell you kind of how it works. So obviously it starts somewhere. Let's start with the cats and dogs. Infected cat and dog has it. It's something happens here. I don't know what this is. I think it goes into the feces. I don't know. Something happens and then it gets in with a flea or a tick. I don't know if it develops into a flea or a tick. I don't know. Like I said, this really, I'm not real sure about the logic of this, because this isn't a very good, clear image. But somehow poop into flea, and then it will go, oh, a flea. Okay, so the flea will eat the infested, like infected egg or larva, or like a rodent, and then the dog or cat eats the rodent and gets it, or they eat the flea. I do not think it comes from the flea bite. I think the dog and cat would have to ingest the flea, because that does happen, but correct me if I'm wrong, but they ingest one of these and that's how they get it. And again, really simple. And that is what it looks like. These things can be very, very long. These are noticeable in fecal. When they come out, they pretty much die as soon as they come out. They look like a little grain of rice. They can be long, but they also look like little grains of rice. I've seen them in cat poop before and had to treat them, so it's very, very common. And last that I'm going to talk about and highlight is Coxidia. Coxidia is a little bit more complicated. It's been told to me it's like a parasite, but it's more of an infection. So Coxidia can affect lots and lots of things. So birds, cats, dogs, rodents, cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, rabbits, okay? Coxidia is gnarly. The main symptom of Coxidia is diarrhea. I mean, any intestinal worms, you get that, but most of the time you're gonna get that nasty green diarrhea. Sorry to be very like blunt with my verbiage, but that's typically what you're gonna see when you get Coxidia. And so again, highly host specific, very, very host specific, and very easily spreadable. Let me say that, very easily spreadable, because you could step on a bird that, let's say there's a bird that has Coxidia, you step on their fecal and move their fecal across the yard, and another bird could get it that way. Like very, very, very spreadable, very contagious. So technically it's a single-celled organism / parasite that lives in the digestive and intestinal tract of the animal. And like I said, spread through feces. And it causes inflammation and gastrointestinal issues. I couldn't find like what they eat and what exactly it does to the animal. It was pretty much just telling me like it gives them diarrhea. Like, yeah, I know that, but essentially it makes them sick. And typically when you get like Coxidia, or you get tapeworms, or you get barber pole, you'll probably have multiple. I've had cases where we've just had barber poleworms, but we've also had a trifecta before where we had Coxidia, we had tapeworms and roundworms, and barber poleworms. So you can get them all. So just be wary of that. And Coxidia is treated differently than worms are, because the worms are treated with a dewormer. Coxidia is typically, the quickest treatment you can get is called Corid. I don't know the actual name of it. So this is Coxidia, but it's also called coccidosis, or you'll hear vets call it Coxi. That's treated with Corid. There's other treatments, but we've used Corid because that's what's widely available. And that is what a Coxidia looks like under the microscope, not visible to the naked eye. I think these are, I don't know what that word is, but I think it's eggs. So I put 2 life cycles here to show you that it's pretty much spread the same way, just a little bit different. And the reason it's a little bit different is because your goats and your sheep aren't typically going to poop in there where they eat. Well, they will where they eat, but in their water they won't. But we know chickens will poop in their water, and so they can definitely get it from the water. So like everything else, eggs, the non-infective eggs in the feces, the infected bird sheds non-infective, we're going to say eggs. Oh, it is eggs in feces, contaminating the environment. Then in the environment, the eggs sporulate and become infective. So 48 hours after sporulate occurs, it becomes infective. So maybe possibly from right here to here, you could go out on the ground and spray something like diatomaceous earth and maybe smother them. I don't know. I've only had birds have Coxidia twice in my time here, and I treated it, and they were both inbrooders because they were young birds, so I treated it quickly. And so then after that, other birds ingest the infective eggs while drinking and eating. So, you know, chickens, even if you put their stuff in bowls, they can still poop in it because they're small animals and they roost and all of that. And so that's how that happens. And then they hatch and invade the intestinal tissue, causing damage and creating more eggs. And then we start over. And that is the name for for the strain of Coxidia. Again, there's different strains for different hosts, meaning different species. And kind of same thing happens here with the sheep. You know, you see it start in the sheep, and then the eggs and the feces, and then right here is where they go from non-infective to infective. And this says it takes like 2 to 3 weeks, something with warmth, so I don't know. And then from there, it's in the grass that the sheep then eats, and then we start the cycle all over again. And the way that you find out about all of these worms and such is by getting a fecal done, and you see them under the microscope. But these you will not see visible to the naked eye. It has to be through the microscope, where the tapeworms you might actually see, in the Barber Poleworms you might actually see. I've only ever seen tapeworms in fecal. So then here are some other parasites we watch for. I say because I don't think we've really had them to a degree where I've had to do like extensive research. Now remember, there are other parasites out there, especially for like horses and donkeys, but we haven't explored into that yet. It hasn't become a problem. So everything else I'm listing here is either we might have had it, or it's just something very common on a farm. So starting here, well, I misspelled. Sorry, that really bothers me. Those are external parasites. So external parasites such as mites and lice. Your chickens will get mites, your goats can get lice, and they're blood sucking and just not good, but they are external, easy to treat, easy to identify in my opinion, but that is also very common, something we deal with a lot. I think that mites and lice are pretty self-explanatory. I think you understand that, so I didn't feel like they needed their own full slide, but very, very common in multiple species. Then you have roundworms. Roundworms are going to be very similar to Barber Poleworms. I don't exactly know a lot about them, but I know that Google did say if you get Barber Poleworms, you will probably have roundworms too. And I know we've had roundworms before, but the dewormers we use treat roundworms and tapeworms and Barber Pole all alike. So you can get roundworms as well. Then there's liver flukes. I've never come across liver flukes, but people talk about them, and I know they're common. I don't know how you treat liver flukes. Actually, I think Valbazen treats liver flukes, so maybe our dewormers treat them. I haven't gotten any results with liver flukes before, but I do know that it's very common. And I don't know all the animals that get it, but I do know animals that we have can get it. And then just ticks and fleas, and that's the end of my presentation. So I hope that visual helped you a little bit. It definitely is hard to understand, even as somebody that's continually researching the topic and learning, and new information comes out, and it can be hard to understand. And I understand that, you know, a lot of people had questions when we had animals pass, like how did this happen so fast? How did you get them to the vet and they still passed? Well, you know, like these worms, especially Barber Pole, are extremely deadly. You saw just how much blood one worm can consume in a day. And especially for animals, like prey animals, like goats, like sheep, they hide sickness because that is their natural instinct. And so if they hide it, combined with them going down quick, it is a battle. So I hope that helps you understand a little bit more kind of how it's challenging for us and how hard it is to battle it. I know I didn't talk a lot about the treatments because I feel like the treatments vary depending on your vet, on what you'll do, just depending on your herd. Everybody has different procedures and methods. Everybody does different things to prevent. But that's the science behind the worms, the parasites. And I hope it makes a little more sense. I hope it clears some things up. I hope it helps you understand a little bit more why farmers literally fear parasites, like fear them, and why the loss is so great with these once you get them, and why it is so hard to get rid of them. And then if you begin to think of the drug resistance because of how bad these worms are, it makes sense why it's hard to get rid of them. And so I just, I like to educate, and I hope you enjoyed my little teaching lesson. And if you like this, I can make more PowerPoints and we can do more stuff. I really like teaching. I love it, and I feel like this is my way of teaching now. So if you want to see more PowerPoints on more topics, give me some topics. We'll do some stuff. I can teach you how to grow a plant if you want, but I don't know how to grow a plant myself, so we'd really be learning together. But, I don't know. I can teach you about all the things. I love doing research. I genuinely chose to do this in my free time when I was supposed to be doing clay. I was supposed to be doing some clay stuff, and I chose to do this instead because I thought it would be a lot more fun. Because this obviously isn't a necessary video. I didn't just do this for content. I did it because I thought it would be really fun to make the PowerPoint and explain all of it. But that's Teacher Megan for you. I hope you enjoy, and I'll catch you next time with another one. Bye, friends.